Om Tava Kathamritam Tapta Jivanam Kavibhiritam Kalmashapaham Sravanamangalam Srimadatatam Bhuvi Grananti Bhurida Jana. So, Bhakti as enunciated in Srimad Bhagavatam. So, we were studying the various practices of preparatory Bhakti, the Vaidhi Bhakti. That's 9 practices are there, Navadha. Of that, the first 3 we have studied in the previous classes. The first practice, the first Vaidhi Bhakti practice is Shravana, listening. And then after this Shravana, it was Kirtan. Shravana, Kirtana, and today is the third, the Smarana, remembering. So, Shravana is listening, Kirtana is chanting, and Smarana is something which speaks of the mental remembrance. Kirtana is something loud chanting, and Smarana is the remembering. So, this Smarana has a great role to play in the development of Bhakti. Actually, it is the sanam bonam of all the practices, because Kirtana should ripen into Smarana, and this Smarana, remembering, can lead to the highest spiritual realization, as has been spoken of even in Bhakti Shastra as the Samadhi. And that Samadhi, by definition, is of course be different from the Samadhi of the Jnani, but essentially the process we will find is almost the same. So gradually, let us try to proceed step by step to understand that by resorting to the script, the texts of the Bhagavatam, to find the relevance of Smarana in our spiritual journey in the Bhakti tradition. So according to Jiva Goswami, there is a verse in the Bhagavatam which is the best definition of Smarana. So what is that verse? It's in the 11th skandha, 11th canto, the 13th chapter, the 14th verse. So what this verse states: Etavan yoga adishto mat shishyai sanakadibhihi sarvato mana akrishya mai adha avishyate yatha. So the actual yoga system as taught by my devotees. So Bhagavan Krishna is saying that it is he who taught this bhakti to his devotees, and it is the devotees who again has taught this bhakti yoga to their succeeding devotees. So this speaks of the parampara. So this actual yoga system as taught by my devotees. Etavan yoga adishto. Adishto means to instruct. To whom? Mat shishyai. It has been instructed by whom? By Bhagavan's Shishya. The 4 Kumaras, we know. This Sanak, Sanandan, this Sanatan. So this here he is speaking of Sanakadibhi. By that he is indicating all the 4 Kumaras. so headed by Sanata Kumara, is what has been taught as the Bhakti Yoga practice. In the second line, that practice has been mentioned. Sarvato mana akrishya mai adhya aveshyate yatha. So having withdrawn the mind from all other objects, one should directly and appropriately absorb it in me. Aveshyate, to absorb. The entire mind should become like a sponge which will be absorbing the nectar of devotion. First, it has to be squeezed out like a sponge. It is already wet with the worldly desires. First, we have to squeeze out all the pollutants, all the moisture mixed with the pollutants, that is squeezed out. And the mind is like a sponge. Once it is squeezed out, and now it has to be absorbed by the nectar of devotion. That's the idea. Sarvata mana akrishya mai adhya. So having withdrawn the mind from all other objects, sarvata, from all other objects, mana akrishya. The mind is being withdrawn from all other objects. Adha avishyate yatha. Mai adha avishyate. And one should directly and appropriately absorb it in me, merge it in me. So this is the idea which has been spoken of as Smarana, the remembrance. As Sri Ramakrishna says that in spiritual journey, at the beginning, we are like a housefly. Sometimes it sits in filth and sometimes it sits in the nectar. But gradually, through our practice, what we have to do? We have to transform ourselves into a bee. The bee never sits on filth. It always sits on the nectar and nectar alone. So at present, our mind maybe have developed a little devotion. So it, of course, now and then gets absorbed in the thought of the divine. But again, it gets polluted by the worldly thought. But with this gradual practice of trying to purify the mind by getting rid of all the worldly entanglements and trying to keep it in God, this gradual practice at last helps us to transform into a bee. So it's a bee which sits only on nectar. It never sits on the filth. So that's the idea which we find Jiva Goswami is highlighting by referring to Bhagavatam, this particular sloka, and saying this is the best definition of Smarana. So absorbing all of one's thought in God is the goal of Vaidhi Bhakti. That's the ultimate goal. That my mind should be always be contemplating on the divine. That has been repeatedly stressed as the ultimate goal of all yoga. Even in the Gita, in Bhagavad Gita, we find in the 6th chapter, the Dhyana Yoga, the yoga of meditation, the 6th chapter, the 47th verse, what it says, Yoginam api sarvesham mad gate nantaratmana sraddhavan bhajate yomang same yukta tamo mata. That who is the best among all the yogis, of all the yogis, those whose mind are always absorbed in me. This bhajate yomang same yukta tamo mataha. So this is always absorbed in me and who is engaged in the devotion to me. So this madgata antaratmana. So that his entire mind is always running towards the Lord. It is always resting in the Lord who is seated in the core of our heart, in the lotus of our heart, antaratmana, who is just within. So it is always engaged in devotion to Him. And with great faith, to them only the Lord is saying, I consider them to be the highest of all. So here also we find the idea of Smarana, constantly, that has become spontaneous, constantly thinking of the Lord. Then again we find, this is being stressed in the Bhagavad Gita so much, this idea. In the 18th chapter, the 65th verse, Again, the same idea we find, Manmana Bhava Madbhakto. It's one of the most significant verse in the Bhagavad Gita. Manmana Bhava Madbhakta Madhyaji Mang Namashkuru Mame Vaishyasi Satyante Pratijane Priyosime. Always thinking of me, devoted to me, worship me, and offer your this obeisance, respect to me. So doing so, you will certainly come to me. He's giving that assurance. If we can keep our mind on the Lord and Lord alone, know it for certain, we will attain Lord as our ultimate goal. So this is my pledge to you. He's just assuring that for you are very dear to me. Says Pratijane Priyosime. So I'm just assuring you, you being my devotee, know it for certain that if you can constantly keep your mind on me, and that also with full devotion, you have a sense of worship, and then you attain me and me alone. So all this speaks of Smarana, this constant remembrance of the divine. So remembrance is possible, so that it's naturally what we find, that this remembrance is possible only if the heart is pure, that all other distractions has fallen off, that it is freed from all mundane desires. So Kirtana is a purifying practice, is an essential prerequisite. That at the very beginning, just to think mentally is quite difficult. So first resort to this physical means, Kirtana, which can even be accomplished with this not only chanting but also dancing, as we find in the life of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, dancing down the street, taking the name of the Lord. The entire psychophysical being is being involved, just the way when we get involved with this sensory world. All the senses, the more engrossed our senses are, the more intense is our enjoyment. Say, for any worldly enjoyment, what's the criteria for the intensity of our pleasure? That how many senses are involved. So that's why we'll find that when you go to a restaurant, how nicely the food will be served. It should look good. Nice fragrance. You go to any shopping mall, even in the parking lot, they devise it in such a way that the smell, that the fragrance, the flavors of the food court reaches the parking lot. From there itself, you get that that feeling. Even if you had no plan for having some food, you will be drawn towards it. So the smell, the sight, the taste, and then when you are even eating, the texture, all those things, the more all the senses are involved, the more intense is our pleasure. So similarly, to counteract these worldly desires, when I'm thinking of God, just sitting and just trying to remember God with our mind, it may not be very practical. Because when we enjoy the world, we find all the senses are involved. So the same way we have to involve all the senses while taking the name of the Lord. So in doing Kirtana, that's why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he devised that what to speak of chanting loudly, even dancing in the name of Lord. That's the shrine full of the fragrance of the incense, nice flowers, nice decoration. So all your senses are getting involved. Your sight, your kirtana, your ears, your this organ of smell, and this prasadam, the taste. With all this, always try to remember the Lord. And then when you have already started doing this, then your mind gets gradually purified. And then it is possible to get rid of all the distractions and sit down quietly and remember of the Lord alone with your pure mind. So that's why purity is the essence of our spirituality. Even we find very nice that even in the Bible, that there's a very nice saying of the Jesus, The blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Swami Vivekananda was, when he was in the West, as he knew that most of the people there are from the Christian background, so anything, if he is quoting from the Bible, that will appeal to them more. And that's why we find he is bringing that reference of the Jesus word. That is what he's saying, very interesting. He's saying, if it so happens that all the religions get demolished in the world, for some reason or other, all the religion becomes extinct, and somehow only one sentence of Jesus that somehow survives. What's that sentence? Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Swami is saying again that all the religions, that one sentence is sufficient for all the religions again to manifest. Because after all, the essence of religion is that. There's purity. And that is possible how? When you are chanting the name of the Lord, and then what happens? That, very interesting. When I am chanting the name of the Lord with full faith, the mind is bound to become pure. You know why? Because the mind, we think, can do multitasking, but it can never do multitasking. Very interesting. That mind throughout the day thinks more than 60,000 thoughts. In modern psychology they say. Constant, it is jumping from thought to thought. More than 60,000 thoughts we think per day. But at a time, at a moment, the mind has only one thought. It is jumping from one thought to another thought at a very quick succession, giving us a feeling that mind can do multitasking, but it can never do multitasking. At a time, it can have only one thought. So if we can sincerely try to keep the mind in God at each and every moment of our thought, that as the mind cannot do multitasking, the other thoughts are bound to fall off. That's why Sri Ramakrishna, when Swami Turiyananda, as a young boy, one of the direct monastic disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, when he asked Sri Ramakrishna, that I find that my mind sometimes thinks all the worldly things, how to get rid of all these worldly thoughts. Sri Ramakrishna just said, chant the name of Lord. Swami Turiyananda, as a young boy, he thought that there must be some very sophisticated practices, pranayama, some postures by which we can get rid of lust and other worldly entanglements. But Sri Ramakrishna is saying, just chant the name of God. He first never believed, but because of his faith in Sri Ramakrishna, he thought, why not give me a try? Why not me give it a try? And in a very short time, as he already had good samskaras, he got marked, this was advancement. He saw that mind really is getting pure. All the so-called the lust and other distractions are falling off. He is attaining purity. Swami Turiyananda was known for this extreme purity. He was extremely sattvic. Even Swami Vivekananda told that as is among us, he is the one who is just is a manifestation of the idea of sthita pragya, as has been spoken of in Bhagavad Gita, pure and always keeping the mind in. There's this, the thought of the divine. It's always tranquil. It never gets distracted. So this is the idea which we find that how it has happened simply by practicing the name, this chanting of the name of Lord. What happens as we do that, the other distractions are bound to fall off if we can keep the mind in the thought of God. In the words of Ramakrishna, he used to say our body is just like a tree on which many birds are sitting. These birds indicate all the worldly thoughts. They are the sins. These birds indicate the sin in the form of worldly thoughts. They're sitting on the branch of the tree called this body. You will find if the birds are sitting on the branch of a tree and you just go below the tree and clap your hand, the birds all fly off. So Sri Ramakrishna used to say, just clap your hands and take the name of Lord. That's also a form of kirtana. And that kirtana can lead to Smarana. Then what happens? He's saying if you just clap your hands and take the name of the Lord, and then what happens? all the birds in the form of sin sitting on the branches of your tree, of this body, they all fly off. They all fly off. Your mind becomes pure. So that's the idea. We find that remembrance is possibly the only way to pure our heart. So when the mind is withdrawn from all these mundane engagements and fixed on God in this way, then Krishna gives his own self. This is a wonderful assurance in the Bhagavatam. In Bhagavatam, very, this strong assertions are there. What Bhagavan is saying? Smarata pada kamalam atmanam api yachati. That Krishna gives his very own self to one who remembers him. That we have the idea that it is, but by remembering God, we go to him. But here, the Lord is saying that if you can keep your mind in me, it is I who come near you. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say in the beginning of the spiritual journey, God is the magnet, we are the iron filings. It is He who is drawing us. And as we grow in our devotion, we become the magnet. God becomes the iron filing. He is drawn. That's what Bhagavan is saying. Krishna gives his own self to one who remembers him. Smarata pada kamalam atmanam api yachati. Atman means I give myself to him. I'm drawn towards him. So that's the assurance which God is giving in Bhagavatam. So now, how this Smarana can take us to that ultimate spiritual realization? What's the psychological mechanism of Smarana? This has been discussed in details by Jiva Goswami while commenting on these various slokas of the Bhagavatam. What he's saying is the first thing, that when we go on mentally remembering the Lord, then what happens? The mind enters into a state of flow. What happens? The other thoughts has fallen off. Your mind is fixed in the thought of God. And not only that, the devotion has developed. Love for it has developed. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, let the thought of God become your toothache. What's the idea? That by constantly remembering God, it has become so habitual that this thought has become spontaneous. When we have toothache, we may be doing all our activities, but we can never forget of the toothache. It is always there in my mind. However, we may be engaged in other activities, a part of the mind is always registering that ache. I can never get rid of it. So the thought, the toothache is something which is always there in the background of our mind. So through this constant remembrance, the thought of the divine also becomes like the backdrop of our mind. It is always there. It becomes spontaneous. And the more it becomes spontaneous, what happens? The other entanglements, they start falling off. What to speak of all the other external entanglements? The very next stage, first all the external entanglements falls off. You enter into a state of flow. The mind is constantly thinking of the divine. And when this thought becomes more and more engaging, then what happens? Even the bodily feelings fall off. You will find in the life of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, that when they enter into that state of remembrance, they appear like inert object. They have lost all the external, senses. The senses are no more interacting with the external world. They appear to be inert. So that's the idea of Videha. That Janaka was Videha. Why he was called Videha? Videha means one who is without body. But Janaka, as a king, was an embodied being. Then why should we call him a Videha? Videha means, what the real meaning is, that though you are in the body, you have lost the sense of your body. Your remembrance has become so intense that even all the bodily feelings, which are actually the biological alarm system, like your hunger, the pangs of hunger is a biological alarm. Thirst is a biological alarm. But the mind is no more registering them because it is fully absorbed in the thought of the divine. So all those biological alarm system also gets suspended. The mind doesn't register to them. So it gets so absorbed. So that you enter into the state where even all your bodily feelings start falling off. And then the last thing to fall off is the ego. That when I am fully absorbed in my meditation, you will find that all the external distraction has fallen. Even my bodily feelings I am not aware. But still 3 things I am aware of. What are the 3 things? That I am meditating. There is an object of meditation. I am the meditator. There is an object of meditation. And the meditation is the process which is connecting the meditator and the object of meditation. So in our scriptures they say, this triputi, dhyana, dhyata, dheya. As long as the ego is there, these 3 are there. But at last this ego, which is this, the mind is engaged with the ego, a small part of the mind, always from our birth to that. I never forget that I am this body-mind complex. A small part of mind is always engaged with the ego. But when the meditation becomes extremely intense, that ego falls off. That's been called as Triputi Bheda. I become one with the object of meditation. And Sri Ramakrishna here gives a very nice example. That you have as if created a hole in the wall of ego. The entire process of Smarana is like what? It's just like I am thinking, I'm visualizing the form of the divine. I'm repeating his name. This is the Smarana. So, visualizing and repeating. These two should go hand in hand. Why these two should go hand in hand? Because we will find all our thoughts has 2 components. Nama, Rupa. When the mother is thinking of the child, in her mind, she is visualizing the form of the child. Spontaneously it happens. And of course, the moment she is taking the name of the child, immediately that visualization happens. So that each and every thought has these 2 components. Nama, Rupa. So to make the meditation effective, so that it can counteract with all other thoughts, that our meditation, this Smarana should also have, the thought should have 2 components. Nama, Rupa. When I am repeating his name, I am trying to visualize the form of the divine. This process is just like chiseling in the wall of ego. There is a wall, I don't know what's on the other side. Sri Ramakrishna says, very nice example. And now I start creating a hole. So I'm chiseling. What is this chiseling in the wall of ego? What I'm doing? This form which I'm visualizing, that's the framework. I'm chiseling out, taking the name and I'm chiseling. When the chiseling is complete, a hole is formed. I was curious to know what's on the other side of the wall. Sri Ramakrishna says very nicely, there is a wall, I don't know what's on the other side, I make a hole and then I just peep through it, I see infinite expanse. There's no end. Infinite expanse. So my perception of this infinity, for that this whole becomes the framework. So here also, through meditation, when this Triputi Bheda happens, I become one with the object of meditation. A whole has been created in the wall of ego, which is having the form of my Ishta. And now when I just try to see what's there beyond the ego, it is the consciousness and consciousness alone which percolates through that whole, the form of the whole, which you have made through your meditation. What a nice way Sri Ramakrishna is saying. So you will find in the Bhakti Shastra they say that when through Smarana you go to that Samadhi, then the visualization which you have is no more the visualization of some worldly object. So now when I am trying to meditate, visualizing, that form is just like any other worldly form. I see the picture of my Ishta, or I see the statue of my Ishta, and I am visualizing. It is just the visualization of the statue. It is just the visualization of the photo. But when the Triputi Bheda happens, I go to the Samadhi, then also I see the Ishta, but it is no more the visualization of some worldly representation. It is the consciousness and consciousness alone which is percolating through the hole in the wall of ego which you have created. So that's why they say that when you go to that realization, it is Chinmaya. It's no more material perception. You are just having an immediate living presence of Brahman in the form of your Ishta, in the form of Ishvara. So that's this, all the four process. Let's just try to understand. But what's that? First, with the attainment of bhakti, the mind enters into a state of flow because of the incessant smarana, resulting in vivid visualization made from the imprints of the conventional experiences, like the photo or the statue. These are the conventional experiences. With that, you are creating a vivid visualization, but it is still an imagination. It's not realization. It's a vivid visualization. And then second, what happens? In the initial stages, then first the devotee will enter in the state of videha, where all bodily sensations cease to register due to the mind's deep absorption in Ishvara. There's a second. And then finally the ego too dissolves. As Sri Ramakrishna used to put it, a hole appears in the wall of the ego, shaped according to one's visualization or ideal. When that happens, then this real spiritual realization happens. What's consciousness or the essence of Brahman then flows through that opening in the ego, leading to the direct experience of Ishvara. It is no more a mere mental image shaped by the past impressions. It is no more the previously I've started with that, but it is the immediate and living presence of Brahman, of consciousness itself, in the form of Ishvara. That's why you'll find that whenever anyone referred to the Mother Kali of Dakshineshwar as a statue made of stone, that Rani Rashmani has built this temple and such sculpture has sculpted it, immediately Sri Ramakrishna will say, no, it is not Mrinmayi. It is not something made of inert matter. Mrinmayi means something which is made of mrit, means mud or soil. No, it is not a statue made of stone or soil. It is Chinmayi. It is the concentrated form of this Chit, of consciousness appearing in this form. So now you will understand that when the ego dissolves, one person goes to samadhi, then the form which you are visualizing, that actually is the form which has been chiseled out in the wall of ego, and through which the consciousness and consciousness alone is percolating. So though you visualize the form, but that form is no more an experience of the conventional the things of the world. It is not the conventional experience of the worldly imprints, but it is the immediate and living presence of Brahman itself in the form of Ishvara. So that's why we will find that when Naren asked Sri Ramakrishna, have you seen God? His answer was wonderful. Yes, I have seen him. But the only difference is I see him much vividly, much directly than I see you. Just see, that's the idea. That when I am seeing you through the mind and through the senses. But when I see the Lord, I transcend the mind and senses. It is a direct experience. It is a paraksho anubhuti. That ego has totally dissolved. You have gone beyond your mind and senses. It is a direct experience. All our experience, these terms are so interesting. All our experiences paroksha. Paroksha means with the help of something apart from me. Paroksha. So, what are these things which are apart from me? I am the conscious principle. What are the things apart from me? This mind and senses. So, these mind and senses are like the tint of the glass. When I am wearing a tinted glass, as per the color of the glass, the world gets tainted. If it is a red color, everything I see red. If it's a green, everything I see is green. Similarly, this mind and sense is tainting our vision. That's why they are all paroksha, indirect experience. But when I go to that experience, that through Smarana, at last I get absorbed there, then what happens? That experience is actually something which transcends the body, mind, sense. It is a direct experience. That's what is called aparoksha. It is immediate. It is no more with the help of something apart from me. Something apart from is without the help of my mind and senses, directly I am experiencing something. That's why Sri Ramakrishna used to say Naren, that yes, I have seen him. The only difference is I see him more clearly than I see you. So now this Jiva Goswami expands Smarana into 5-step sequence. And we will find it is so similar to the last 3 stages of yoga, this Patanjali yoga, this Ashtamarga, the eightfold paths of the yoga. The last 3 stages tallies with the stages which has been spoken of by Jiva Goswami as the final stage, which leads us to the final spiritual experience through Smarana. The Smarana becomes the first step, and then it is followed by the another 4 steps, which tallies almost with the yoga practice. What it is saying, first comes Smarana, to think of Ishvara according to one's inclination. As per your inclination, whatever may be your Ishta, you are thinking of Ishvara. So it corresponds to the Patanjali's Ishvara Pranidhana. So those who you are familiar with the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, that Tapah Swadhyaya Ishvara Pranidhana, that's the Kriya Yoga. It starts with that. So this Ishvara Pranidhana, to constantly contemplate on the divine. So that actually is something which corresponds with the initial Smarana. That leads to, as per Jiva Goswami, to Dharana. What is Dharana? If this Dharana is something we will find is the 6th limb of the Patanjali Yoga Sutra. This Yoga Sutra. In the Patanjali Yoga, the 6th limb, the 6th practice is the Dharana. And what is this Dharana? Withdrawal of the mind from the external objects and focus of it on Ishvara. Your mind, you are withdrawing from the external objects and trying to focus on the Ishvara. This Dharana leads to Dhyana. So you will find actually this Dharana, Dhyana, Dhruva Smriti, Samadhi. They are not something different practices. It's the same practice. Only the intensity is the reason for the intensity makes this as the third, fourth, the second, third, and the fourth sequences. It's the intensity. It's not difference in kind. It's difference in the so-called the intensity. It's not something a different practice. It's different only in the measurement. So this dharana leads to dhyana. And dharana means what? That my mind was still getting distracted. I was bringing it back again and again and trying to keep it on my Ishta. Through that practice, now my mind has become pure. The thought of God has become habitual. And that is being spoken of as dhyana. So from dharana, now it's called dhyana. The mind has a constant flow of the thought of God. So that this dhyana is the 7th limb of the Patanjali Yoga Sutra. And this leads to dhruva smriti. When their mind, in their mind, dhyana gets ripened, that leads to dhruva smriti. Dhruva smriti means in your mind, the thought of the divine now remains constant. Whatever you may be doing, even other activities, if the mind is always having the thought of the divine in the background, it is always there. So fixed, spontaneous remembrance of Ishvara, flowing without interruption, like a continuous flow of nectar. That's just now we were saying that Sri Ramakrishna's example of the toothache. When you have a toothache, a part of your mind is always engaged with that pain which you are feeling, the ache in your tooth, whatever you may be doing. So similarly, Dhruva Smriti speaks of that your meditation has ripened so much that nothing can stop you thinking of the Lord. You may be doing other activities, but your part of mind is always in the presence of the divine. That speaks of Dhruva Smriti. And that leads to that Samadhi, which just now we were speaking of, the Triputi Bheda. At last the mind gets so much absorbed that you become one with the object of meditation. Your ego has also dissolved. You become one with the object of meditation. And then the realization of the divine is something which is no more your mere imagination. It is the realization. You are having a direct, immediate experience of the divine in that form. So that's Samadhi. When only the object of awareness is manifest without any subjective or self-awareness. You have forgotten about yourself. Only the object of meditation, that's there in your mind without the idea that you are something apart from it. So that happens in the final stage. So this is that's your subjective awareness has fallen off. So you will find that it is almost similar to this process of meditation as has been spoken of in the Yoga Sutras. But there is only one difference. There is a very, very significant difference. What is that? That the nature of samadhi differs in the Yoga Sutras and the Bhakti tradition. In the Yoga tradition, the ultimate goal of samadhi is to remain absorbed in one's Swarupa, your own Atman. Yes, that you are the Purusha, you are in no more associated with the Prakriti, and you get identified with the Purusha, your own self, the pure, formless nature of the self. That's your Swarupa. In contrast, the Bhakti tradition envisions samadhi as a state in which the devotee has a direct vision of Ishvara. So that form, where that you have created a whole in the form of your Ishta, and through that the consciousness is percolating, and you are experiencing that and that alone. So it's not just yourself, it is experience of the Ishvara. So this vision is not a mental construct formed by past impressions, as we were saying. It's not just the photo or the visualization of the statue, or the idol. It's no more. I started with that, but it's a direct and immediate experience of Ishvara. It is fully transcendent form and with divine qualities. It's the embodiment of pure Brahman. Brahman is appearing in that form. As we find poetically, it's mentioned that when Bhagavan incarnates as a form of Lord Krishna, through his life, the essence of Vedanta is as if dancing. When Krishna is dancing, it is not someone in flesh and bones who is dancing. It is Vedanta Siddhanta Nrityati. What a nice poetic expression. The ultimate essence of Vedanta, that is dancing in that form. So this Bhakti Shastra, that's why you will find, speaks of not the realization of the self, but the consciousness taking the form of your Ishta. That's the thing which one realizes as the ultimate, this step in which they attain through Smarana, when this Smarana at last takes them to this Samadhi. Smarana, this next was Dharana, Dhyana, Dhruva Smriti, and then it takes to Samadhi. So this culmination of Smarana to Samadhi has been depicted nicely in Bhagavatam. It is actually in Samadhi the entire Bhagavatam has came out. Samadhi of Vyasa. So in that we find in that episode where Narada is instructing Vyasa. What is instructing? That you have actually witnessed the divine sport of Krishna. When Krishna was sporting, you were present. You were present in this human form. You have seen Krishna taking the human form, doing the divine sport. Now Krishna has departed. But you, through your memory, try to remember that. So first it will be just your memory, which has association with that historical Krishna. But this memory, as your mind is pure, will take you to the state of Samadhi, where all this visualization will no more remain just this, the remembrance of all the acts of Krishna in the physical plane. Then what you experience is something which is an experience in the divine form this eternal celestial being of this Krishna. That is called Chinmay Shyama Chinmay Dham. That's Sri Ramakrishna in the Gospel also he mentions that his divine play which we saw in this earth is just the reflection of the divine play which is constantly going on in the celestial plane. So through Samadhi you relate to that, and then what you write becomes authentic. So that's very nicely we find in the very Bhagavatam in the very beginning. That's what Narada is asking Vyasa. That you go into that state and then you write the the divine play of Krishna and that's what the Bhagavatam is. So what's that particular instruction which Narada gave to Vyasa? Atho Mahabhaga. We find in the very first skandha of Bhagavatam, the 5th chapter, the 13th verse. Atho Mahabhaga Bhavan Amoghadrik Shuchisrava Satyarato Dhritavrataha Urukramasya Akhila Bandha Muktaye Samadhina Anusmara Tad Vicheshtitam. So Vyasadeva, your vision is completely perfect because already you are pure. So Bhavan Amoghadrik. Amoghadrik means whatever you see is not biased. Our vision gets biased because of our worldly entanglements. There's a very nice example in our scripture that suppose there is a stump lying in the corner of a park in the dusk, in the twilight hours, because of insufficient light, all the various persons will be seeing that stump variedly they will see, as per their bias. A thief is running from the police. He's scared of the police, he's running. From a distance, he sees that stump and thinks it's the police. The police who is in search of the thief, from a distance, he sees the stump and thinks, oh, that's the thief. A small child was playing in the park. Now it's getting dark. It knows the child's mother is waiting somewhere at a distance. And so the child is in search of the mother. From a distance, it sees the stump. It thinks it is the mother. The mother who is waiting for the child thinks it to be the child. And someone is waiting for the beloved, to meet her the beloved. From a distance, the lover thinks that stump to be the beloved. So as per our bias, the stump appears in so many various ways. So that speaks of imperfect vision. Our bias makes our visions imperfect. For one who has no bias or no worldly desires, he sees the thing as it is. And that's what's the meaning of Amoghadrik. So your mind is pure, is not biased. When you look at the life of Krishna, it doesn't get tainted by the worldliness. So that's why you alone can write his life in the form of Bhagavatam, Amoghadrik. So you're famed for your holiness and you are firm in your vow. You are Shuchisrava, famed for your holiness. Shuchi. Shuchi means purity. Srava. Srava means all speaks of your purity. Sravana, from the word Sravana, the word Srava came. That everyone speaks of your purity. That you are Shuchisrava. You are Satyarata. You are always engaged in the truth. Dhrita Vrata. You are firm in your resolution. So you alone can think of this Urukrama. Urukrama. The Lord is called Urukrama. As Vamana, just in 3 steps, he covered the entire creation. So this Urukrama means just to walk one step followed by another step. So as Vamana, he pervaded the entire creation. So this idea is the Lord is the thing, the Lord alone is pervading the entire creation. That was physically demonstrated as Vamana Avatara. And that's why he's called Urukrama. This Urukramasya Akhila Bandha Muktaye. So you can think of the pastimes of the Lord. And then Samadhinam Anusmara. You can think of the pastimes of the Lord in Samadhi and Tat Vicheshtitam. And expound the same. Why you should do that? Because of the salvation of the entire humanity. So here we find this Smarana. Smarana leading to that ultimate Samadhi. The Samadhi, Anusmara, which is going to the Samadhi. Because only when you go to the Samadhi, there all the bias has fallen off. What you are seeing is without any bias. That is something which is genuine. So go to that state and then try to relate to the story, this life story of Krishna. And that will help the entire humanity to proceed to the path of liberation. So this Tat Vicheshtitam. So this wonderful sloka. Here also we find the indication of Smarana leading to Samadhi. Such visions are completely perfect because they are totally free from ego. Then that only makes you Amoghadrik. Amoghadrik, there's no bias. completely free from ego. And then only it becomes authentic. And the same thing we find that even, this when our Mahendranath Gupta, he was writing the gospel. The same thing. He never wrote it just when Sri Ramakrishna was speaking. It's not that time when he was writing. He used to hear whatever Sri Ramakrishna used to speak. He had a vivid memory. He will go back, and from his memory he will contemplate on it. And from this contemplation, the entire gospel has come out. It's just like the way the Bhagavatam has been produced. The aim also, like Vyasa is producing the gospel from his memory by intensely thinking of all the conversations that was going on at Dakshineshwar. So this is because of the falling of the ego, all the biases fall off, rendering perfect vision. That's just now we were saying that example of seeing the stump in the twilight hours by different persons. So Vyasa thereby had the perfect vision of God in Samadhi. Listening to the instruction of Narada, Vyasa went into that state of Samadhi through Smarana. And then Bhakti Yogena Manasi Samyak Pranihite Amale Apashyat Purushang Purnang Mayang Cha Tad Apasrayam. So in his mind, purified and concentrated through bhakti, he had the perfect vision of the Supreme Being, and the power of Maya depended on him. So it was not only the Lord incarnates by resorting to his own Maya, by resorting to Yoga Maya, Atma Maya. So this Lord enacting the divine play with the help of his Yoga Maya, that he vividly saw, and that's what he related as the Bhagavatam, the scripture of Bhagavatam. So this entire Bhagavatam is a product of Smarana. Through Smarana, going to the Samadhi and then relating to the divine play of Krishna. So this Smarana plays, that's why, a great role. So it is Vyasa through Smarana has produced the Bhagavatam. Why? So that by reading it and just reading the Bhagavatam and contemplating on it, again we resort to the Smarana, the same process. That again can take us to that realization. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, Leela dhore dhore nitya puchana. Resort to the divine sport, the Leela, and that will take you to the Nitya. That will take you to the divine, the absolute. So this is by holding on to the Leela that Vyasa presented the gospel, this Bhagavatam, to the humankind, so that by resorting to the divine play of the Lord, we can also attain the Nitya. So this Leela dhore dhore nitya puchana. So that's the significance of Smarana we find. So we will find that the best example of such a vision is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's ascendance from Bahya Dasha to Antardasha. In his life we will see, he will be listening to the divine play of Krishna, and suddenly he gets totally absorbed. Hearing just one or two incidents, he gets so absorbed, he appears to be inert, but inwardly the tremendous, this flow of devotion is going on. So when he comes back from Samadhi, then he relates that when others see him in that inert state, they start chanting the name of the Lord. And when they chant the name of the Lord, he again comes down to the realm of this world. And then he relates. He says that, why you disturbed me? I was enjoying the eternal Krishna in his eternal celestial world. This is Nitya Shyam, Nitya Dham. In his Nitya Dham, I was enjoying. It's not just Smarana leading him to that Samadhi. The same thing we find again in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. That he used to go to Samadhi now and then during the conversations and during the Kirtana. In the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna we find so innumerable such reference that Sri Ramakrishna is getting transported to the set of Samadhi just by hearing the Kirtana, the divine singing and the conversations on God. This take him. His mind was extremely sensible. In his life we find there are so many instances. Once he was just by walk, he went to the for the first time he went near the BT road. It was some road in Calcutta, it's still there, which was just constructed. The Barakpur Trunk Road. If you go, you will find it's a straight road. There's no curvature. It's just a straight road. And seeing that, Sri Ramakrishna went into Samadhi. When he came back, what he related was wonderful, that this road is just like the heart of a sadhu, of a holy man. It is straight, there is no curvature, there is no curve, there is no complexity, and it is broad. It's straight and broad. So just see this worldly experiences taking him to some spiritual realization. And then we find that when he saw the lion in the zoo, immediately he went into Samadhi. He couldn't see the zoo anymore because it reminded him of the Divine Mother. Because lion is the carrier, the Vahana of the Divine Mother. So seeing the lion, it reminded him of the Divine Mother, and that took him to Samadhi. Even the life of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was the same thing. Someone indicated that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was passing by some village, and someone told that the soil of this village is used to prepare the drum for Kirtana. Khol, they call it Khol. Hearing that, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went into Samadhi. The soil, the drum, the Kirtana, and Kirtana of whom? Of the Lord. So this sequence of thoughts immediately takes them to Samadhi. So Smarana, going to the state of intense divine ecstasy. In the life of Sri Ramakrishna, there are so many such examples. One day he was just passing by the road of Calcutta in a carriage, and he saw, in a horse carriage he was passing, and he saw an English boy. It was the British India. An English boy, he was leaning against a pillar with his hands folded and one leg crossed over the other, just standing there. Just relaxed way he was standing, leaning on the pillar with the hands folded and one leg crossed over the other. Immediately Sri Ramakrishna went into Samadhi. When he came back, he related what happened? That it reminded him of Krishna. Krishna is Tribhanga. We know that he is holding the flute, the elbows, hand is bent from the elbows, both the hands are bent from the elbows. And one leg is crossed over the other. You find in the image of Krishna. And in the hip, there's a little bent. So these three bends are there in the form of Krishna. The same thing he's seeing in the English boy. His hands are folded, leaning on the pillar, the hip is bit bent, and one foot is crossing over the other. So immediately he goes into the state of Samadhi. So when the mind becomes pure, you will find Smarana takes you directly to that spiritual realization. So that's how that Smarana has been given this very high place in this Bhakti Shastra. That the Vaidhi Bhakta, the third practice, the Smarana, is something which, if done perfectly, can be the sanam bonam of our entire spiritual journey. It can take us to that ultimate goal of the direct spiritual vision of the Lord. So with this, we stop the discussion today of Smarana, the third practice of the ninefold practice, the third practice of the preparatory bhakti of the Vaidhi Bhakti. So we will take up the Pada Sevanam, the fourth practice, again in the next class. So with this, we stop our discussion today. Thank you all. Namaskars.